Hello, and welcome to the Cultivating Confidence podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Grams. I am a life coach who specializes in anxiety, health, and human design. And I also happen to be a functional medicine pharmacist. This podcast is a compilation of conversations that I've had with clients and colleagues. So listen in as we explore the mind, body, and soul's confidence in its many forms. All right. So let me know if you guys can relate to this at all. So let's say you start working on yourself. You're feeling good. You're feeling motivated. But then suddenly your focus shifts to, something in the relationship that you're in, how something needs to change like yesterday, because somehow you didn't know that whole thing is just crumbling before your eyes. Right. And then once you spend a little time getting that back on track, which, takes all of half a day because you realize how dramatic you're being, all the problems at work then take center stage, and you're convinced that it was the work stress all along. That was the problem. Why didn't I see this before? Why did I spend all my time on this other stuff that didn't really matter? Right. And ultimately, before you know it, you're not taking care of yourself. You're exhausted. Everything's a problem, dramatic problem. And you're just at your wit's end, needing something to change. And you're not really sure what, but it's everything. And then you start through the cycle again. Right. So once you're in this part, there's no meaningful progress that has been made in any area of life, despite all of the work and effort and energy that you've put into it. And I think it also, for me at least, has played out in very short form as well. And I notice it happening in the middle of my coaching sessions. And in those moments, it goes something like this, where it's like, okay, I know for sure that the main problem I'm having is this, that's stopping me from what I want to do is, this. Maybe it's that I don't want to perform a specific task. And then my coach will help me explore the idea that, I might be capable of figuring out how to perform this task. And then my brain jumps to immediately oh, well, I'm already doing too much. I don't have time to fit it in. I'm overwhelmed. That's the biggest problem, and then, okay, coach gets me to admit to myself that, this is also kind of a non-issue. I do have the time. I can prioritize other things, but I just keep choosing other lower priority tasks with no judgment, just observing okay, brain wants to focus on this other thing today. And instead of making meaningful progress, we want to put that on hold because it's fine and jump to something else, right? So if I can figure out how to do it and I also have the time, then, if those aren't the issue, then I for sure don't fit the bill for something that anyone would want to listen to me for, right? Something about me is flawed beyond repair. And then we're beyond what we can fix in a day, right? And that's for sure the problem. And also let's just throw on some body insecurities and how I need to work on my nutrition and fitness so that I also look the part of everything that I'm trying to do, right? And then coach very politely leads me back to, people will listen if I can help them, right? They don't care what I look like. I'm a real human being who struggles with things too, and they might find that relatable, right? So basically, I'm sitting there in a state of confusion and resistance, and there doesn't seem to be a right answer anywhere, because when one problem that I perceive problem is resolved, another one's just sort of waiting in the wings to take center stage. So in that moment is when I usually notice that brain is doing the bait and switch thing again, where it lays one excuse out as bait. And then when I look closer and I find out the excuse is flimsy at best, my own brain gaslights me into believing that the other new problem was the underlying issue the whole time. And it just keeps going on over and over and over again. And I'm like, okay, well, damn, this is a lot of drama of my own brain's own creation. And I can recognize that in my own thought patterns in this moment. And it sucks to realize this. But when I take a step back like that and I realize, okay, all it is me having a little bit of fear that's rattling around that brain does not want to acknowledge. And that all of the rest of it is exaggerated and overreactive and completely useless for me, because all it is me needing to face, in this case, a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety maybe. And it's nope, we can't do that. We have to distract you with all these other shiny things that are much more dramatic. Let's hold on to that, because then you don't want to experience any of this stuff, right? But that tiny, tiny perspective shift is all it often takes for me most of the time. And like, it just a reminder that it's like totally normal for brain to do this, but it fights so hard to come up with literally any excuse that is not fear, so that I don't have to face the fact that fear has arrived without my permission once again, right? So why is it a problem when brain goes in these spirals? It might seem obvious, but it's a problem for me because I end up exhausted and super self-critical and frustrated, and I feel like I'm spinning my wheels and going nowhere fast. And I personally don't want to feel like that. I don't want the brain drama and the bait and switch tactics. And I would really rather grow and change and explore what my life could be if I got my shit together. And even now in my like half shit together state, I've had some pretty incredible things come my way. And I want that to continue, right? I need to learn how to regulate my I almost said immune system, my nervous system. I need to remember to, just calm down my nervous system while this stuff comes at me so that it continues to come. Because in the energetic, give and take, ebb and flow, if we're resistant to what's coming towards us, even when it's like, especially when it's good, it's going to stop coming, right? It's like, oh, you're no longer friendly. We're going to go elsewhere. And it's normal to be kind of in this in between, this stressful, like, oh, I'm not sure what to do. But bringing awareness to it is kind of where it'll help you regulate that nervous system and continue to push forward, even when you're feeling negative things along the way. So, in my experience, and I think this is true of many other people who are on a similar path of growth, the more I grow, the more dramatic brain thinks it needs to be in order to keep me safe. And the more dramatic brain is, the deeper I go into my fight, flight, freeze response, which for me personally is usually freeze. I avoid things I don't want to finish. I don't open up with what I'm going through to my spouse or my friends or anything. I stop caring for myself. I stop making sure that I'm doing the things that will help me feel amazing in my body. I pretend that, people like you who maybe could use my help are not out there waiting for me to say something or to say, a thing, right? So what's the benefit of changing? Again, it seems pretty obvious, but life gets calmer. You can focus more. You can start to filter out the drama so that it doesn't completely exhaust you. And instead, you can focus on making progress and feeling discomfort in a way that actually helps you take charge of your life and live. Because, like, either way, you're going to feel uncomfortable, whether you're sitting stewing in a brain spiral of drama or you're like pushing yourself to grow and move and learn. You're going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be discomfort along the way. So which flavor of discomfort will actually help you become the person you want to be? And how you stop the brain drama usually comes first in the form of awareness. I think I already said this, but you have to be able to catch your brain in this pattern. And it often starts by looking back and analyzing what has happened in the past. So after you get through a particularly dramatic brain moment of the bait and switch, what I started noticing was that when I was confronted with an easy solution to whatever dramatic problem I had, I would immediately go to yeah, but what about, some other dramatic problem? So it was that little phrase that I would think in my head that I was finally starting to catch. Well, but yeah, but what about this? Yeah, but what about that? But this problem, we didn't discuss this one, right? But the more frequently you look back and analyze what you went through, the faster you'll start to pick up on it, to the point where in the moment you're able to notice it happening, but you're still unable to do anything about it. And that's where like self-criticism spiral sometimes comes, like, I can see that this is happening, but like, I'm just going to stay in the drama, right? Totally normal. But then the more you notice it in the moment, that's where the phase comes where you start to remember your power. You start to notice it in the moment and you can start to change and challenge your thought process. And it's basically like, hey, what the heck, brain? I see you with your drama. Why don't you just get out of here? come back when you have something useful to contribute. And usually in my body, I start to feel a lot of resistance. But then once I confront it, there's sort of an acceptance that steps in where it still doesn't feel good, but there's a lot less suffering involved. So it's like, okay, I see what brain's doing. I'm just going to accept that brain's doing this. We're spiraling again. This is just part of the process. And even though it feels shitty, like I'm not suffering in it. I'm content with feeling these negative feelings, right? And then often asking yourself different questions can be helpful because when brain is presented with a question or a problem to solve, it'll try to answer it just about every time. And most of the default questions we try to go to are like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I focus on one thing at a time? Why can't I follow through with anything? Who can I look to blame my lack of progress, or what happened in my life that I can blame, right? And it's all very whiny, dramatic questions like that that don't actually have you taking any responsibility for your brain's role in whatever is going on. And brain then sees those questions and it sets out to find very whiny, dramatic answers for those specific questions. They're not useful. They're exhausting. They get you nowhere. You end up in self-criticism because it's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Here's all the ways. I will list it. And brain's so proud of itself for being so right about all the things. But then you can ask, you notice yourself asking those questions. And then it's like, okay, well, why don't we ask better questions then? And some might call them solution focused questions, or like looking for solution focused, problems. I don't know. But instead of like asking what I'm doing wrong, what is it that I'm doing right? Or even like, it doesn't matter whether you're wrong or right or anything like that, but what's the most important thing I want to focus on? Or going deeper, what am I afraid of when I think about focusing on one thing? What does brain think that I'm going to miss out on? And then we can kind of explore that and also decide whether that's important enough to keep or let go. So what step do I want to take next? What do I need to think in order to keep me going? What beliefs do I need in order to succeed with what I'm trying to do? And also, one of the more important things, how can I take care of myself when my brain spirals like this? Because there's a whole big dose of self-compassion that needs to come in pretty much always. I need a constant reminder of it, at least, of, you know what, my brain is totally normal. And even if I have this degree or this certification or this extra training or whatever, like my brain's still pretty dramatic. And that's totally normal. And I am totally normal. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me wanting to sneak extra sugar in throughout the day when somebody brings in candy at work, right? I still want to eat all of it, right? Totally normal, even though I know that, okay, this is going to cause blood sugar issues and this is going to it's going to affect my mood, and then I'm not going to be able to focus. And like, there's a whole spiral effect. I know that that's going to happen. That doesn't mean I don't want the cookies, right? Yeah. Then also more questions, kind of digging deeper again. Is there some subconscious thought that I could work on that could really help me here? So is there any unworthiness that I'm feeling? Are there money fears? Is there time scarcity? Is it abandonment issues, right? And that's a real thing that I struggled with for a little while, in a very specific sort of way. But I had the subconscious thought that if I grow too much, like if I have a successful business of my own creation, then my spouse will leave me. And it was completely irrational, but I was so convinced, without exploring it, I was so convinced subconsciously that a successful business meant that every waking hour would be spent working on it. I would never be able to have time for my relationship. So it would crumble to bits, right? Even though I have been very lucky and my spouse has been nothing but supportive with my ventures, like I was convinced that this would no longer be acceptable, right? And I'm going to lose everything that I have put my heart into, right? So that time, all it took for me to snap out of that spiral was for me to recognize that in this particular bait and switch pattern going through, it was going between business stuff, preemptively fixing my relationship that was for sure going to crumble one of these days, and like eating my face off as a coping mechanism for all of the negative emotions that I was feeling. It was like, okay, well, if it's not one thing, then it's the other. But I realized like, okay, well, I'm doing this to cover up this and this to cover up this. And oh my gosh, none of it's good. None of these thoughts are useful for me. So uh, sometimes it's that easy. And sometimes there's more work that needs to be done. But really laying out what is fact versus what is like just brain drama. What is the bait and switch? What's the, well, yeah, but what about thing that your brain is trying to focus on? And how can you bring more awareness around what's going on? How can you get a hold of that pattern? And, ultimately, when you do, you can save all that energy that you have spent spiraling and distracting yourself, and you can start to use it to intentionally create the life that you actually want to live.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. Many of you will be able to take the ideas that you've heard and apply them in your daily life, and that's really all you need. That's amazing. But for those of you who could use a little one-on-one help with how to make these things actually work for you in your real life, please reach out. The link to schedule a consult with me is in the show notes. You don't have to do this alone. See you soon.